happy Thursday to you. We've got an interesting show. Is generative AI a productivity mirage? Is it all just smoke and mirrors? Are autonomous agents the future? And minding the incident management gap. That's what we've got on store for you. You're watching Techstrong, gang. Hey, happy Thursday, everyone. Alan Schimmel here for Techstrong, and I am holding down the fort in our studio here at Boca Raton. I think it's going to be this way a bit as everyone is kind of migrating. Seasons are changing, clocks are falling back, and it is what it is. But nevertheless, our gang is assembled, and they're all over the place, but let's introduce them to you here on Techstrong Gang today. First of all, we'll go to the czar of Silicon Valley, our editor in charge there, John Swartz. Hey, John, how are you?
Hi, Alan. It's good to see you. I am living the dream as in Dreamforce this week.
That's
it's
true.
The big Salesforce show.
Dreamforce.
AI everywhere.
Have you ever been called the czar before, John?
No, I don't know whether to take that as a compliment or
as
it kind of
there's no
weird
Bolsheviks around, you should be okay.
Or political appointments.
Okay.
Those usually don't work out either.
Appointments. And don't answer your pager.
Gosh.
But let's move on. Let's move on from John over to Mitchell. Mitchell, you're home in Colorado.
Yeah, pagers don't work above a mile high, so we're safe here.
It's not on our agenda today, but you got to ask yourself, what the heck?
It's a James Bond movie. It is.
That really, that was...
It's insane.
Insane. Anyway, Mitchell, of course, is our CTO and Futurum Group CTA. It's a pleasure to have him on.
Good to be here.
And then joining us from his he's right outside Yankee Stadium, where he wants to be. Actually, Harrison, New York. Don't kid yourself. That's not the Bronx. It's much tonier.
I'm in the great state of the Bolsheviks. So here we go.
Bolshevik state. Okay. Where they don't have beepers. And then joining us in Charlotte, Raleigh, Durham, Triangle area, it's our developer, advocate extraordinaire, Hope Lynch. And Hope, great to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for being here, having me here and talking about pagers. You don't know what a rabbit hole I went down last night trying to discover how they did that. And I did. But
no, they did. But it turned out it was the company that supposedly manufactured them in Taiwan didn't manufacturing. They licensed the name to another company that's supposedly in Budapest, but doesn't have a working phone number and points back to the Taiwan address. It seems to me that Budapest company is just a front.
Yep. Yep.
Yes.
And I mean, this is something we'll see in the movies one day or something. I have a feeling
they've just handed a big part of a plot line to someone. Truly,
I mean, Stuxnet was a great story.
That's nothing compared to this.
It's crazy. I don't want it to take. We have a lot to go over today.
We will be coming back to this topic on the cybersecurity issue.
Because at the end of the day, look, it's all about supply chains.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. This was the ultimate supply chain attack. Anyway, we'll save it. We're going to save that. Talk about S-bombs, though. I just had to throw that out there. Anyway, Mike, we're going to head off today with a story we've got up on DevOps.com, generative AI and the DevOps productivity mirage. I don't know if I actually believe. I think this is one of those studies that maybe I don't know. I just don't.
We will see. Let me explain to you what these folks at UpLevel did. They actually created, it's not a survey, it's a study, and they had two groups, a control group and a test group, and they monitored their productivity through a bunch of metrics, including pull requests and things like that are pretty much standard DORA kind of metrics things. And what they found was that while we have seen survey after survey where developers say that they are more productive, it's not actually translating into something that organizations are benefiting from by seeing more software actually delivered faster. And they're also, in this survey, encountering more vulnerabilities. And I was talking to Tracy Bannon about this very issue, and the MITRE group has a similar study that they are launching, and they're asking people to participate in because they have similar suspicions. And other folks are starting to talk about this issue where it's kind of like the developers have a perception bias where because something was easier for them, that somehow or other that benefits the organization they work for. And well, turns out it may not be the case. Now, this may not always be the case, but right now it seems like there's a significant amount of, to your phrase, smoke and mirrors. So, Hope, I know you looked at this and you're in DevOps. So, what's your feeling?
I'm having a distinct feeling of deja vu. This really reminds me of way back-ish when there was this metric around lines of code. If you produce so many lines of code today, you're doing a great job and you're a great developer. So quantity of output, equating it with productivity, but ignoring quality. How easy is it to maintain? And is there any actual value to it? And with AI, anecdotally and by studies, we know there are more bugs. So developers are getting more code faster, but then they're turning and spending more time stitching it together, debugging it, ensuring it meets quality standards, making sure it meets compliance standards. So I think this is an old problem just with a new face.
Ellen, we did a shameless plug. Techstrong Research did a study on AI augmented DevOps, just released about 2 months ago. And we titled it AI augmented because that was really what the study was telling us, is it's not about generating code and people don't write code anymore or something to that effect. It's really about all parts of the SDLC, software development lifecycle, and is AI playing a role in whatever form, generative AI, machine learning, et cetera. And about 25% of the respondents, we had over 500 respondents, said yes, they are using AI in one or multiple places across the SDLC. The top areas were development and testing, but most of it is augmenting, like code completion. Small sections of code maybe are written. But you can kind of tell where we are because only 14% of people just trusted the output of any AI. Everyone else, it has to go through pretty serious review process before they're willing to let it kind of flow down whatever part in the process. The other I think the most interesting stat out of it was the people who rated themselves more in the higher end of the maturity and using DevOps, they've been doing it a while, their organizations are DevOps organizations, they tended to be using more AI in DevOps across the SDLC and also seeing more results. Again, it's modest now, but that also impacted how much they got AI. So to Hope's point, it's not just about spitting out code and let's measure, that as output. I think software is a much more complex process.
So I'd like to weigh in here.
Yeah, I thought as much.
Yeah. Upworks, what do they do for a living?
They are a
software people with jobs.
Intelligence platform.
Yeah, no, they provide people with jobs, right? You hire people to do jobs.
I think they have a platform.
I feel like I walked into the back room at Rick's American Cafe and I'm shocked that there's gambling going on.
Mm-hmm.
What did you expect them to say? Now, that being said, I agree wholeheartedly with Hope's comments and with the findings that Mitchell has. How do we measure productivity gains in the DevOps lifecycle? In the SDLC and the CI/CD process. I think it's a question of augmentation still at this point. But yet, I was out in Austin last week at JFrog Swamp Up, and I had a chance to go to dinner with my friends John Willis and Patrick Dubois. Patrick Dubois, the guy who started DevOps, right? He coined the term. He said, Alan, I was so down on DevOps over the last couple of years because I really felt it kind of maybe run its course a little bit. I wasn't juiced up about it anymore. What new was there to explore? And this whole AI thing and how it's going to help DevOps has got me so juiced up that I've been on the road ever since, doing workshops, speaking, evangelizing, how AI is making life better for DevOps folk. How AI, through the use of AI, so many companies' products that we see out there right now, including some of these platforms, are going to be so easily duplicated or not cloned, but replaceable at a much less level that, it's going to create havoc in the software evaluation space. These are two smart guys who know a thing or two about DevOps. I agree with them.
I think we're on the proverbial journey. I think writing code and writing ahead on code is nice. It helps developers. I don't think we really have seen the part of Gen AI that really helps the DevOps team. And I think what we're going to see is more advanced reasoning engines in these LLMs, and we'll be able to create agents assigned for specific tasks. And that's when we start to see the productivity gains. I think we're the cow is over there, the proverbial half over the fence, as they say, and that the front end of this thing is helping the developers. The back end is, for the engineers is still being written as a story to come.
Because I think for the developers, it's still a chat interface. Write me some code that does this, that, and the other thing. Write an application in this language that does that. That's a chatbot kind of thing. And that's the current state of art with a lot of generative AI. But you're right. This is
Copilots is the other,
right.
In my
Copilots.
IDE, right?
But generative AI, not generative, agentic AI, and just, I downloaded iOS 18 yesterday. I don't know how many of you out there did it. Raise your hands. I have an iPhone 15. My 16 comes Friday. And supposedly I have Apple Intelligence in this iOS 18 Apple 15 phone. And I did a search for an Apple Intelligence app. I went online and wrote, what's the deal with Apple Intelligence? And, search that. There's nothing you could point to per se that interfaces that. It's built into the environment to make it better able and more responsive to your needs. I think that's the AI we're going to see that is going to help DevOps teams.
We talk about, is AI a feature or a product? It may not even be a feature. It may be just so behind the scenes we don't realize what's AI and what's not. And that's sort of like what we want with security. You want it to be transparent as much as possible and not in your face. I don't want it to be dealing with 25 chatbots either.
But to what Alan was talking about in terms of what these agents will do to platforms, that's a very interesting conversation because, I was talking to the folks at Docker about this in their inner loop. And if I start applying AI to these workflows, I'm not necessarily going to want to license separate testing tools and separate things for every function. It's all going to be one motion. It's all going to be integrated and it's all going to be orchestrated. And if that's the case, then to Alan's point, a lot of these platforms that we today invoke separately are going to become features, something else.
Yep. John, I heard agentic AI is huge at Dreamforce. They're talking about agents for everything. AI
yes,
agents.
Exactly. So, exactly. I was just going to weigh in on that. Last week, Agentforce, which is something that Salesforce just announced, basically autonomous agents for very specific tasks across vertical markets, was announced. And we'll go into it in the next segment, but Benioff is talking about this as kind of a way to redefine where Salesforce sits in the enterprise market. In a sense, Salesforce, and I'll just key on them because of what they announced and what they intend to do. They see this as their next evolution, their next wave. Benioff Tuesday night, was talking to Jensen Huang, and he talked about how he would wake up in a cold sweat thinking about, hey, AI had completely upended what they were doing. So in a sense, they want to create billions of these agents. We'll see what happens. I mean, to me, this is kind of this classic conundrum here. And I feel for the developers. In a sense, you're thrust into increasing productivity while evading all the vulnerabilities based on this study. And it'll be interesting how it shakes out, especially with something as ambitious as Salesforce is trying to do.
Yeah.
I hear that thing about agents and I shake my head sometimes and I just go, tell me some task that you really enjoy doing that you're really upset that an AI agent's going to do for you, because I've yet to see one.
It's to me, it's like for finance when they learned, RPA, we can get it to do these lower level tasks. Some people were threatened by it, but other people jumped for joy. I really think it's the same thing. If there is a little agent who can come in and knows I wrote code and it can say, oh, would you like me to put together your blurb for the release notes? Who would not say yes to that?
Absolutely.
Little agent scurrying around writing.
Hey, look, I call that whole story the revenge of Clippy. But anyway,
Yes,
that is a horror film, not a
like with a knife with the hockey
That was a flop, but that was like Howard the Duck.
Anyway,
that was on Howard the Duck. The one thing that Jensen Wang said that was interesting, he says, when we add these agents, it's going to be like welcoming a new team member. It's like another employee. It's like onboarding employees, but the work for many cases is going to be done before you even get to work, before you even arrive the next morning. So there's a positive to that, getting rid of the unnecessary stuff that most people don't want to do.
Absolutely. Hey, we got to take a break. We're taking a break here on Techstrong Gang. We got a quick word for you. And we're going to come back and talk more about autonomous agents. Salesforce and NVIDIA. John just previewed it for you. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
In a world where every line of code powers the future, every keystroke can introduce new threats. As software evolves, so must security. It's time to rethink how we protect our digital world. Join the leaders in DevSecOps and AI at the OpenText DevSecOps Virtual Summit on September 24th. Discover how innovation is transforming software delivery faster, more secure, and smarter. From AI-driven security to the truth behind cloud security, get the insights that will keep you ahead of the curve. Don't just watch the future unfold. Be part of it. Register now and secure your place in tomorrow's world.
Hi, I'm John Swartz here at Techstrong Gang. Welcome back. Salesforce and everyone's favorite AI partner, NVIDIA, on Tuesday night announced this strategic partnership to develop AI features for large customers. Specifically, they're going to develop these autonomous agents and interactive avatar experiences. That should be interesting. The resulting products would optimize predictive and generative AI workflows for things like crisis management in the event of a product recall or service outage, real-time weather impact for travel and logistics for the supply chain, real-time customer support resolution. So what these companies, Salesforce and NVIDIA, are trying to do is create, they say, billions and billions of agents that will do all these tasks, many of which we don't want to do. During a sit-down chat later Tuesday night between Benioff and Wang, they talked about the opportunity. And in a sense, they want to create, as I said, billions of these agents. And Salesforce, in its essence, thinks that this is going to create this huge next wave for them. Because if you haven't already noticed, the last few months have been pretty brutal for Salesforce. They've been looked upon as a laggard for AI development. They think this is their big breakthrough, and Jensen agrees with them. We'll see how it unfolds. It's going to take several years. I'm going to throw this out to the panel. What were your thoughts on this, and what type of impact do you think it might have, not just on Salesforce, but in general?
I always liked the Salesforce story because they were basically saying that they were going to provide the trusted governance and the framework for using multiple LLMs. And I'm going to ask, so what if I'm behind on development of LLMs? There's plenty of other people doing that. So it's a question of, to me, it's not necessarily the leader of AI isn't the company that builds the biggest and greatest LLM or provides the GPU. It seems to me it's going to be the company that figures out how to harness all this stuff, and they might be in a better position to do that than the other guys. So I wouldn't count them out on the AI side, and I certainly wouldn't start throwing around words like lagger.
It would reminds me of
Mark Benioff kind of that the behavior of Mark Benioff kind of betrays that, because he is in a how can I say this? Not a panic, but he's concerned because he keeps reaching out to reporters. I know because he's texted me twice in the last couple of weeks, reminding me how important this is.
Right. So Mark,
he protests a little bit.
You're telling me Mark does AI envy, right?
No, but John's the czar. Of course, Mark would reach out to him.
No, he wanted something. But Mike, I'll briefly interject. It's interesting what you said, because in a sense, what Salesforce is doing here is kind of like what Apple does. In a sense, there's an established market, but in the case of Salesforce, they really have doubled down on security and governance and compliance. And it's something that Mark, to his credit, has talked quite a bit about to me and to a lot of other people. So in a sense, they see this basically as kind of not just something that would help Salesforce in these ordinary tasks, but something that would have significant impact on science, education, et cetera.
Yeah, it kind of takes me back to I used to manage human factors group, had 2 times in my career. Before we called it customer user experience or customer experience. And the secret sauce isn't using AI. Secret sauce is figuring out the experience or interaction models for a company like Salesforce. I mean, they're not in the background processing insurance claims. So much of what they do is upfront working with humans, internal processes that have been automated, working with sales team, communicating with customers. If that to me is the key, if they can figure out the models, avatars, not avatars, whatever, it may not be the right idea. May not need the next Clippy to refer back to Clippy. It's that may or may not be the right idea, but it's who figures that out. Because I don't really want a better chatbot from the chatbots we've got on websites now. They're all pretty useless to me anyway. I found them really frustrating because they're so limited. But there's times I want to talk to a human. So I think the way they figure this out will determine their win or loss, not how much AI they use.
You know what? To that point, Mitch, I only want to say representative once and get to a real human. How many of us scream into the phone, representative? Well, I could get you a representative more quickly if you give me representative. Can't they just make the 0 button again?
I don't know what you're doing it all wrong, because it's going to be my digital representation of me calling a digital human on the other side, and the two of them are going to argue about it and then let me know how it turns out. So
your bot's going to say representative 25 times.
Well, I'm going to teach it to say really loud. Let me ask you another question. What's the over/under on how many fireside chats with other CEOs is Jensen Huang going to do this year?
Oh, one, 2 a week.
That's a great. I don't know.
It's at least.
I lost track.
It's at least
ServiceNow, Adobe.
Yeah, it's at least 2 a month, I think. Right now.
2 a month. I think it's 2 a week.
Yeah, seems to me like it's a lot.
That's like
where it's weird. They have to.
Yeah, Jack.
Well, I was going to mention the fireside chat they had was interesting because I would say more than half of it was a glorified psychiatric session. I mean, Jensen on multiple occasions was talking about his career and what this meant to him. There were years at Dreamforce where Jensen would pop into the press room trying to get anyone to write about his company.
Yeah.
And he's been running that company for more than 30 years.
That's a company that does game processors or something, right?
Right.
That's great for 18 to 24-year-old white boys.
I mean, I'm all for Jensen. Seems like an earnest and nice guy, but I have to ask the question:
Yes.
Is anybody else doing anything interesting in AI? Because it doesn't seem that way.
Well, every time Sam Hartman opens his mouth, he gets in trouble.
Yeah, be careful.
I
Or
just
Elon
call him
Musk.
as I see him out here because, of course, I'm not in the rarefied air of Silicon Valley like our royalty, but down here in Boca Raton, that's what it looks like to us.
And the
Anyway,
hinterlands of
yes.
Boca Raton.
I think the phrase you're looking for is overexposure. Right?
Uh-huh. Well, there may come a point
Yes.
where there's maybe overexposure, but we'll see. Anyway, anything else on this? Otherwise, let's take a break and let's come back to, I'll put it in my best British voice, mind the incident gap, please, or the incident management gap, please. No? Okay. You're watching Techstrong, gang.
All right, folks, and we're back. And as promised, we're talking about, a survey that Atlassian did where they talked to folks who spanned everything from software engineers to your typical IT administrator. And they're asking folks about how incident management gets handled. And the interesting thing about it is a lot of the folks seem to think that they were doing a pretty good job and they had it under control despite all these outages that we seem to hear about. But what was interesting, Mitch, was the number of organizations where the DevOps team was actively involved in incident management was relatively low. And I can't make up my mind if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But from your experience, how aggressively should the DevOps team be involved in these incident managements? Or are they like the second or third tier and we only call them when, the proverbial shit really hits the fan?
Well, what it made me think of, thanks for Atlassian for doing this survey, is if you compared this to what it was maybe 5 years ago, is it better or is it worse? Because in theory,
It's like we're in a presidential debate, Mitchell.
Yes, exactly. Boy, rerun the tape, right?
Uh-huh.
Make IT great again? Is that
Make
right?
IT great again.
Are you better off? Let's not even go here.
For sure.
You know what? I'm liable to have someone camped out at the office here for 12 hours looking for me. So
I think they're on their way, Alan.
That's what's going around in Florida.
I think they're on their way. I'd start packing up. But anyway, is the glass half full or is the glass half empty, or is it just half-assed? To me, it's always, who is the developer who owns that application? That was always the question for operations. And how you have that list, whose pagers, whose cell phone, who to call, who to get a hold of when there's an issue with this app. That's a little more complicated in the world of microservices and cloud native and different cloud providers and platform engineers and all of that. To me, it's a pretty complex web, and anybody that's got that figured out, I think, is well a step ahead. So I think in the survey, Mike, it was like 60% of organizations where developers are part of the IT team managing incidents. I don't know. That seems like not too bad to me. I'm not disappointed by that number. Does every developer want to be working on incidents? No, you want the right developer working on incidents, right? That's my view of it.
I've got a few thoughts on this one. So again, shocking gambling is going on. There's a gap between DevOps and ITSM. Who knew, right? We've been talking about that for as long as I've been doing DevOps.com. But I think fundamentally here, when we talk about incident management is generally post-deployment incidents, right?
Yeah.
Because that's when incident management kind of rears its head, right? And so because it's post-deployment, the DevOps team is not usually frontline, though one of the principles of DevOps was having your developers and your DevOps team more involved at that front line, that tier one, as we used to call it, right? Tier one. But I think by and large, DevOps team members are tier 2 support folks. And so, with the advent of autonomous agents and AI, more things theoretically get handled at tier 1. And so there's not just an incident management gap. The gap goes to not just the volume, but to the quality, if you will, of if it gets up to the DevOps team, it's usually a bigger deal, a harder problem, a more acute incident than gets handled down here by your normal ITSM kind of responses.
All right. Hey, Hope, in theory, I'm investing in DevOps to prevent the incident in the first place. So are we getting any better at preventing the incident, or, and maybe the ITSM guys are feeling better about things because we are getting better at preventing it?
Well, that is a big question. And that really does depend. I have been in some organizations where they still support the hero mentality, right? So there is little incentive to reduce incidents because the person who gets promoted, the person who gets recognized is the person who has saved the day. But in other organizations that I've worked where they've gotten rid of that, and it's more, the quieter and calmer you can make this, the more things just run, the better we know you are at your job. So the rewards matter. But also, how are organizations integrating ITSM with DevOps? I have worked with some teams where you rotated someone who was actually an engineer on the team with being one of the people who would respond to an incident, right? So they always would have skin in the game because they knew at some point, I may have to be the person on the resolution side. I am not just the person, pitching it over the wall. Getting away from that, to the point made earlier, was one of the original hopes of DevOps, right? You don't just develop and throw it over the wall. You're also there when it's in use and when something goes wrong. So I think overall, it's a cultural shift. It's a need to probably integrate tools because right now tooling for DevOps and service management often are very separate. But I think organizations are drawing closer together. But again, culture change is going to be a big part of that.
I know you went long enough, Hope, that when you start out a response,
yes,
we're in for some good wisdom. So.
Because that is a hot button, though. I mean, that is
I know.
Well, it's a loaded question because it gets to the heart. And I'll give you something else. Not only a similar kind of issue is security. Are we more secure now than we were 4 years ago?
On the old issues.
I got to tell you, I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday. Actually, it wasn't a friend. It was my brother. He's my friend, but he's my brother. And he spent a good chunk of his day yesterday locking up all his credit reports and putting fraud alerts in because he got a batch of letters. I got home in my mailbox, and I'm not kidding you, I had this many envelopes between my wife, my children, and I from a whole bunch of different folks that, we're breached. Our information is available on the dark web, everything, social security numbers, all kinds of stuff. And, giving me all this free credit monitoring, like that's going to help. And $1 million worth of coverage, you got to go sign up for all these things. They give it to you.
And the 4 days that took to send you the letter was really helpful.
Yeah. But, well, that's assumed they did it in 4 days. This is the USPS we're talking about. But anyway, but yet I know that our security is better. I know we're doing a better job generally on security. However, the concentration of this kind of data is such a irresistible honeypot to so many different people for so many, for so many different reasons that I'd venture to say all of our stuff is out there already and has been breached.
To take another look at it, what is interesting, not interesting actually, that Atlassian did this study, because they're one of the few DevOps players that has a really strong presence, maybe stronger presence in operations, ITSM, and DevOps, and early in design. I mean, they have a designer tool. Of course, Jira kind of spans the whole thing. They've got a number of tools now that span that. And then specific, I started a lot of my DevOps tools when I started were Atlassian tools. So they are in that place where things can intersect, and they've done a lot of work of building an AI platform underneath their products that is leveraged in different ways in different products, but also a database that's shared across those products. They've done a lot to bring things together and integrate even multiple versions of Jira into one. So they're in an interesting position to make that more seamless for customers, to bring ops and development together, to bring more ITSM into the development or development into ITSM. So I think from a positioning standpoint, this survey, not surprisingly, this survey does a lot to validate that.
Yeah.
I think, in general, we keep talking about whether or not we're better at security. The point is the bad guys are a lot better at what they do, right? Let's give some credit to the other team here. There's an old thing. I mean, if you ever followed the Civil War, when they asked Pickett, why is it you think you lost the Battle of Gettysburg? He said, well, I think the Yankees had something to do with it. The point here is the bad guys are getting better at this stuff.
Yeah, no, they're more sophisticated. And, we talk about things like AI. They're using AI pretty well too, right? It goes,
and they're very
cuts both ways. Yeah.
They're consistently pioneers in crime, right? I mean, the early adopters, just like the porn industry was in adopting technology and showing others how to use it.
Yes, I could tell you stories about that.
I do love the idea of an embedded DevOps engineer in an ITSM workflow for a couple of weeks at a time, because honestly, they should spend more time out on the front line where their software is, because they'll take those lessons home and make better software.
Well, you know what? When Mitchell and I, we were two of the three co-founders of a company called Still Secure. Mitchell ran VP, he was VP CTO and VP of engineering. He ran the development team, but he also ran the help desk team. And that was something, Mitchell, remember you used to do. You used to rotate in developers to be frontline answering the phones to just hear what real customers were saying.
A lot of ideas were generated by developers sitting on that support line going, you know what, we could solve this problem or make it easier to figure out what the problem is, or. So it's just like in the telephone days, back in the Ma Bell days, I don't know if they still do it. New employees oftentimes went on ride-alongs for installers, pole climbers, installers, things like that, and saw what the people in the field do. There's nothing better than experiencing it. Maybe you don't have to climb that pole, but watching the person do that in the work that they do, and it's hard work that folks do in the field and the issues that they deal with. So there's, I think, some ITSM experience sitting in ops for a while is good for everybody.
I'm not sure they do that because they want to have a better customer experience, or they just want to eliminate the whole function altogether because they hate it.
Well, some do.
Yeah.
Depends on whose book you read, I think.
Whoa. All right. Hey, I got to pull the plug on today's gang. It's been a heck of a Thursday, but we got to get ready for Friday. And we've got a full day of things to do. John, enjoy. Is Dreamforce over now, or?
Oh, it goes through Thursday. So yeah, pretty much
ending today. Okay, and
yes.
Mitch and Mike, it's good to see you guys not on the road. Hope, we're looking for a big announcement from you maybe in the upcoming next week.
Hope so. Yes.
Yeah. But until then. Hey, this is Alan Schimmel on behalf of Techstrong Group. You just watched Techstrong Gang. Have a great day. Stay tuned for our full Techstrong TV schedule immediately following this program. Bye-bye, everyone.
Discover Techstrong Group. the epicenter of tech innovation, we're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.